Hello viewers, welcome to a more DIY type video from the sound card database. First and foremost, I want to express how sorry I am that I was not able to post a video since the move in June. My retro computer space is still not completely set up yet, so there are no old computers, no sound cards, and therefore not much to show you guys at the moment. So to explain a bit, day work has been incredibly demanding from the move in June to last November, and personal love life has been kinda shitty too. I think I don't need to explain further why I lack the energy and motivation to make a video for you guys. So to conclude, I'm still alive, and I will try to pick a steadier pace from now on. Anyway, my house itself is not the talk of today, but rather a puzzling detail about it. I'm an old-timer and I prefer my network connections to be wired, as I always found that they provide more stable and noticeably faster transfer rates in the long run compared to wireless. Also because I don't really trust wireless emissions and I'd be ashamed if you saw me in a tinfoil hat. So yay for wired connections! Sort of. Because wired connections require, well, wires. And the thing that sucks in my house is there's only one phone connection. Just one. And it's in the living room upstairs. Tough luck though, my main computer is not located in the living room, so for the last 6 months I've had a long ass Ethernet cable running there on the ground from the living room into the dining room to the corridor, then finally into the office. Not classy, not tidy. The previous owner originally got the house completely wired for phone usage, but from what I understand at some point they had a falling out with the phone company. Bell Canada. And they decided that in addition to stopping phone service and replacing with the cable connection, they would physically remove all phone wires and plugs in the house, up to the freaking telephone pole outside. When I reactivated the phone service last June, the poor tech guy had to install a brand new wire from the pole to the house and reconnect the only phone plug in the house to the service box. But now comes the interesting part that I've been putting out for 6 months. I want to reinstall phone plugs in every room where phone usage will be useful. Bedroom? Yes. Office? Big yes. Kitchen? Yes. Bathroom? Nah. Downstairs computer dungeon man cave thingy? Absolutely. And at the same time I thought, why not install Ethernet connections everywhere too? I mean, doing all this work for phone wiring, it wouldn't be much more work to do permanent Ethernet wiring at the same time. So I thought, okay, let's buy everything necessary to make myself a complete wired home phone and Ethernet solution that is completely integrated in the walls of the building, is concealed and looks proper, is permanent and easy to manage. Disclaimer. Keep in mind, dear viewers, that I am not an electrician nor an IT professional. Therefore, what works for me may not work for you. It may not even be the proper way to do it. Granted, I did my research and tried to do the best and cleanest work I could, but my approach may be imperfect, and if you see something you don't like, just remember to be polite when you tell me in the comments. That's it. Part 1. Choosing where to pass the wires. My house was built in the 70s and thus is now finished with walls and everything. In consequence, I can't simply route wires through the walls as I would in a house that's currently being built. What I have to do will require a lot more precision drilling and cutting in order to feed all relevant rooms with telephone and Ethernet wiring without destroying all the walls in the process. When you add wires to an existing house, there are generally 2 spaces through which you can feed wires without altering living spaces: the attic and the basement. The attic is a given, all houses have one. The basement is not always viable. Is there a finished ceiling? And if so, is it made with drywall or is it made from suspended material? Drywall would be a no-go, but suspended ceiling may be workable. In my case, the basement has an unfinished half exposing the first floor, and the other half comes with suspended ceiling tiles. That gives me 2 valid choices where to put the wires. Attic and basement are both correct options in my case. I chose the basement because it's easier to access during and after installation, it's warmer and cleaner to work in, and will use less wire overall. Part 2. Buying supplies and tools. Here is the cool part where I had to estimate what length of cable I would need, often going a bit extra just in case. With the basic dimensions of the house, I made a rough replica in SketchUp and took my measurements from there. I intend to split the phone wiring at one spot only, so I need to know how many outlets there will be. Bedroom 1, bedroom 2, office, kitchen, upstairs living room, downstairs retro computing office. That makes a total of 6 outlets. Here are the components I bought for this project. Wall plate combos. I find those cleaner than the boxes we usually have here in Quebec. Old work boxes to support the wall plates. Phone wiring. And I made a mistake here, which I'll address at the end of the video. Phone splitters, phone RJ11 crimps, Ethernet wiring, and Ethernet RJ45 crimps. Part 3. Finding a good central spot for the router and phone splitters. Before moving into the house, when I lived in a very small apartment, all my network equipment was located in the living room. Never again I will make that mistake. Not only is it unsightly and the blinking lights are disruptive when watching a movie or playing video games in the dark, but it also takes a lot of space and provides tripping hazard with the cables everywhere. Here were the requirements for the new location of the router, cables, and modem. 1. Be out of sight. 2. Be accessible. 3. Be tidy. 4. Be central to the house in order to keep cabling to a minimum. And 5. Be upgradable in the future. Since in addition to Ethernet I will be cabling phone outlets as well, I thought it would be neat if I could use the same central space to tidy up the phone line junctions. Since I'm using ADSL for internet, something I always wanted to try is to use only one filter for the whole house instead of one per outlet as kindly suggested by the provider. With those requirements, I found that the best spot to use as a hub is a closet in the basement, located just under the stairs. It is out of sight, very accessible, has a light inside, and is central to the house. Perfect match. Part 4. Piercing walls and the floor inside the wall. Doing renovation work in a finished house is difficult because the updates need to be done in a manner that doesn't leave traces and only minimally breaks existing installations. Adding phone and Ethernet outlets on a wall requires passing wires inside the wall. Needless to say, some drilling needs to be done in order to put the wires inside. What you want to do then, since we established already that the wires will go down in the basement, is to drill inside the wall through the floor to end up in the basement ceiling between the joists. A regular house wall here in Quebec has a thickness of around 4 inches because usually 2x4 studs are used. In some cases, people use 2x3s for closets or DIY projects, but I have a hunch that it's not code. Step 1. Finding studs. First thing you want to do before starting anything is find out where the studs are located in the wall. Usually they are 16 inches apart, but that may vary if previous owners did renovations themselves and didn't respect code. For this step we are going to need a stud finder and some temporary masking tape. I usually find studs by tapping the wall with my knuckle, but today I want complete certainty as to where I'll saw through the drywall. Slide the stud finder laterally on the wall. When the light indicates a stud, place a bit of tape on the wall to mark it. Electrical outlets are always affixed to a stud, so expect to find a stud on either side of an outlet, sometimes even both. In our case, we are adding low voltage wires, so a metal casing to the outlet is not necessary. That's why we will be using plastic old work boxes that clamp directly on drywall. That is why in this case, I'm actually staying away from studs. Step 2. Outlet position and height. Second thing we want to do is draw on the wall where we want the outlet to be. Usually outlets are around 12 inches from the floor. In my case, that's more like 12.5, so I'll respect what's already there and add my phone Ethernet outlets at a similar height. I mark the position I want, then measure the height with the ruler, then draw the edge using the old workbox itself. It provides 4 holes through which you can push a pencil to make marks. Step 3. Cutting drywall. Grab a drywall saw and a hammer and remove drywall where required. It's possible to cut the rectangle in one piece, though when I try that method, the last cut seems to break more often than not, leaving repair work to be done in the future. That is why I prefer to cut in an X pattern and remove the drywall in smaller pieces. Step 4. Drilling through. Scrape part of the bottom edge of the opening to make way for the drill bit. For this project, I use a miniature drill with an extra long drill bit of 1/2 inch diameter to go through the floor. The diameter of the drill bit was chosen to be larger than the size of 2 Ethernet cables. Push the bit inside the wall until you feel it touching the floor and start drilling. There may be a 2x4 placed horizontally on top of the floorboard, so expect to be drilling at least 2.5 inches downwards into solid material. If you're lucky, the drill bit will go through the floor easily towards the basement. If you're not, you'll end up drilling inside a joist or, like me, somewhere inside 2 joists. A possible workaround for this is to drill upwards from the basement to the first floor. Be aware that this is dangerous and take appropriate measurements to make sure you do end up inside the wall. To confirm that this step is complete, check that you see light when you look through the hole. Part 5. Fishing wires using a fiberglass rod. Once the cutting and drilling are done, time to fish the wires from floor to floor. For this, I use an orange fiberglass rod and tape. Tape the wires you want to fish to the end of the rod and insert the rod through the hole towards the basement. Pull the fiberglass rod from the ceiling and the wires will follow. Twisting the rod might help if you find it difficult to push the bundle through the hole. If the hole is too tight, an alternate method is to tape the wires at the opposite end of the rod and pass the rod first through the hole. Once the wire is passed, continue pulling it from the basement and route it towards its end destination. In my case, the wires start in each room and end up in the central closet I chose for the router and networking devices. If you have a large number of wires that need fishing to the same place, a good trick is to fish a rope once in the opposite direction, attach all the wires at once at the end of the rope, then pull the rope back, bringing all the wires with it. To finish with this part, make sure you have enough loose wire on both ends and cut the remaining surplus wire. Always leave 2 to 3 feet of extra length on both ends. Extra length is always good for repairs and adjustments. Part 6. Wiring the plates and crimping wires. Once you have wires sticking out of every wall and they are routed to the hub, it's time to connect the outlets. First step is to slide the old work box around the 2 new wires and secure it to the wall. Old work boxes are interesting because they do not require a wall stud for installation, since they pull on the drywall directly for grip. I say again about old work boxes, I'm using those because telephone and Ethernet wires are low voltage. Don't use old work boxes for regular outlets, as they are probably not coded for use with higher voltages, especially bottomless ones like mine. With the old work boxes secured and at least 2 feet of wire sticking out of each outlet, I must now prepare the wire before installing the outlets. Using a pair of electrician pliers, I remove the exterior sheathing from the phone and Ethernet cables. I then expose each individual wire while being careful not to damage the copper inside. Some outlets use crimping to couple with the cables, and others, like mine, use screws. Both are acceptable. Phone line wires use 4 wires: yellow, green, red, and black. The same colors are used on the RJ11 outlets, so it's easy to match. For the RJ45 Ethernet outlet, however, things are a bit different. First thing to know is that since I'm essentially wiring a router to a computer, the wiring convention I must use is that of a straight-through cable. Using a wrong color convention, such as crossover, will only lead to tears. I recommend Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo to deal with those. When the wiring convention is settled, I move on to the outlet connection. Oh shit, the colors are not the same. Now where's my baby shampoo?
Where's my shampoo?
Don't panic, the colors may be different, but the wiring pattern stays consistent. Wire 1, white and orange, goes to screw 1, blue, and the rest go in the same order, going clockwise. Orange goes to orange, white with green goes to black, blue goes to red, white with blue goes to green, green goes to yellow, white with brown goes to brown, and brown goes to white. Always expose the wires as little as possible. 3/8 of an inch works best for me. When screwing wires, always bend the ends in a U shape to help make a secure connection with the screw. Additionally, the U shape should turn around the screw in a clockwise fashion so that when you tighten, the wire doesn't get pushed outwards. Outlets installed, we move on to the closet. Time to put my new crimping tool to the test. Use the crimping tool's integrated cutter to... No! That's not what I expected. What, for the phone wire too? Well, back to the electrical pliers then. Remove the protective sheeting from the cable. Keep just the smallest amount of wire, barely enough to differentiate the white and something colors. No need to expose the copper in a crimping situation though, that's what crimping is for. Here's the table. Number 1, white and orange. Number 2, orange. Number 3, white and green. Number 4, blue. Number 5, white and blue. Number 6, green. Number 7, white and brown. Number 8, brown. By hand, I place the wires in the same order and insert them into the plastic connector. Then into the crimping tool it goes. Success! I use the same method for phone connectors where the wires are yellow, green, red, and black. The protective coating has to be close enough to get caught and flattened in the crimping process, adding to the strength of the cable. Here's a side view of the crimping process and why it does not need exposed copper. There's actually a small metal notch that gets pushed down during crimping and cuts through the wire, making contact with the copper inside. Part 7. Testing the wires and connections. Once the cables are screwed at one end and crimped at the other, do not forget to test the cables with a dedicated tool for that. Plug the main tool into the wire at one end and turn it on. Doesn't matter which end you use. Plug the other part of the tool at the opposing end and watch. Ta-da! Blinking lights of blissful bliss. If the lights light up and blink in the correct order, it means that current is able to travel forth and back through the wire. With a tool like this, each wire is tested independently and in order. As each is tested, an LED lights up indicating that contact is made. This tool works for both RJ45 and RJ11 connections. When everything is tested and confirmed working, we move on to the next step. Part 8. Finishing up. Once the cable connections are all tested and confirmed working, time to label each wire to know which room they serve. When this is done, it's time for the final step, bringing all the networking equipment downstairs. Here we go. 3, 2, 1... Once everything's plugged in, the final test is to try everything with real hardware. Let's start by trying the phones. Office, living room, bedroom, all good. Let's try the network now. Computer? It's working! I've also added a network printer outside the office. Let's see if it works. Looks like it does. Once everything is plugged in and confirmed working, it's time to plaster up around the outlets where I broke the gypsum. I'll leave to dry and do a primer coat, then a color coat, and this will be set. To conclude the journey, just vacuum up where necessary and you'll be good to go. Here's the end result. 4 new permanent outlets on the house's main floor, a centralized out-of-sight spot for the modem and router, and all wires inside the walls. Made with love, for me, by me. Part 9. Afterthoughts and mistakes. Afterthought number 1. I didn't wire the kitchen yet. There is more than one spot where placing the outlet would be logical, so until I make up my mind, I'll let the kitchen be phoneless. Adding a new wire to the existing installation won't be difficult in its current state, so it will be a breeze to do in future. Afterthought number 2. I used 4-wire phone lines even though regular lines only use 2 wires. The other 2 are only used if I need a second phone line added. I did the work in a manner that will be upgradable in future if necessary. Mistake number 1. When I ordered lengths of phone cable, I got extension cables and didn't realize that there was a difference in how they are made inside. Phone wire uses a single copper wire inside, whereas extension cables are made from multiple smaller wires. I expected them to be bendable at least to use within the outlets. But it turns out that the metal is so cheap that I can break it with my fingers, and strangely it does not bend. I went to the store and bought regular copper wiring when I realized my mistake. Mistake number 2. I tried using the crimping tool that comes with a wire cutter to cut and prepare wire for crimping. Strangely, it seems to be made for flat wire because it just breaks apart round wire like the ones I used. That is why I used electrical pliers instead to remove the coating and cut the wires to the correct length. Part 10. Tips and good practice, I think. Tip number 1. I said it earlier in the video and I'll say it again. Label the wires. It may seem trivial now, but when repairs or updates need to be done in 1 year from now, you'll be glad. Tip number 2. The ideas I used while running the wires were to secure the wires with a stapler so they don't sag and stretch too much, to place them out of the way, out of accidental reach so they can't be pulled by mistake, to leave room for curves in the wire instead of bends, to account for seasonal house expansion and contraction when stapling. Tip number 3. I also left extra wire when possible. Each outlet has at least 2 feet extra wire just in case something needs fixing in the future. Tip number 4. I tried to smooth staple the wires. Depending on the stapler model, there are certain angles that project the staple further into the wood and that presents a danger of staple killing the wire. Practice on a spare bit of cable to see results before doing it on the live wire. Part 11. List of tools. Here's a list of the tools I used during this installation. Here's a list of equipment I bought. Well, viewers, this is the end. Hope you found something interesting in this video and possibly learned a trick or two. Leave a comment if you did and let me know if there are some things I should have done differently. As always, a huge thanks for watching the Sound Card Database and see you next time.